Let's go ahead and take a look at the All-State playoff predictor. And this week, we've got a huge one between number 7 Tennessee playing number 12 Georgia. Now, there's a lot of different scenarios that can play out here.
That away, Scoop.
And we are going to welcome in the authority on it all.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Welcome to the party.
6 o'clock this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long have you been up, by
Face
the way?
holding up well?
You're doing great.
You're doing great.
Yeah, right. Checks in the mail.
All right. Let's start here with this Tennessee and Georgia game. Obviously, there's massive college football playoff implications with it. Scoop might have to change it to the SEC. You had said it earlier on SportsCenter. You are not quick to write off a 3-loss SEC team, especially when it comes to Georgia and their strength of schedule. How imperative is the game this weekend, and what are the implications of it?
Well, it just got a lot bigger because you saw what happened, and college football fans need to understand, just because you're the 12th ranked team doesn't mean you're in the college football playoff with Boise State displacing them. So that makes this game against Tennessee huge, huge. But here's the thing. There have been 13 3-loss teams
I love this stat.
over the decade of the college football playoff, finish in the top 10. That's why I hesitate.
Yeah.
Because, and you mentioned SMU in the ACC and all of this realignment. This is what we're getting. People are losing.
Right.
Here it is, right?
Yeah.
You're Georgia. You got to go to Austin. You got to win. You got to beat Tennessee. And so this is just the fruit of that happening is teams are going to have multiple losses.
And I think this is where we were with this extended playoff, right? Because one of the worries was we're going to lose the importance of those games early on or later on in the season. But here we are. We're talking playoff caliber matchups right now this upcoming week. So let's look at if Tennessee wins or loses. Let's put if Tennessee loses this game. What's their chances? Drops down to 62%. So they still have a good shot to make the college football playoff. However, when you look at Georgia and their chances, let's say they lose and become a 3-loss team, it drops to 55%.
That makes the playoff with a loss is at 55%.
Yeah, if they lose to Tennessee, they still have a 55% chance to make the playoff.
As a 3-loss team.
Yeah.
This is what I'm trying to explain. But here's the thing.
And smoking Texas, right?
Yes.
Right, and that's where I kind of fight back as far as the SEC and just how tough it is. You know, because I look at a team like South Carolina and say, they can compete with almost anybody that you see in the playoff bracket right now. You know, so that's just my SEC bias.
So smoking Texas. Speaking of Texas, one of the problems for them that we talked about early on in the show is their wins, right? They don't have any great wins. So if Texas, let's say, loses to Texas A&M, and we put Texas A&M to win out because that would change the probability. So if Texas A&M wins out, 99% chance to make the college football playoff, but that means they will beat Texas, and look where that is, 43.
So the 3 teams right now that control their path, Texas A&M, Texas, and Tennessee, which is wild. But if you look at the mathematical equations of this, 3-loss LSU can still get into the SEC championship game. It's bananas.
It's scary. I mean, because our viewers are going to be like, "What the heck? How is that even possible?"
I don't know, dude. A lot of people have that.
It's the strength of schedule, though, right? One of the tiebreakers, strength of schedule, and LSU would be one of the top-ranked strength of schedules left in the SEC, whereas Texas would be the last.
Of all of the things that could be controversial this year, the tiebreakers in conferences could wind up being something people are screaming about.
Because nobody knows. Nobody knows how.
You're right. No, and this is like a great sign and something that I'm sure you're going to write articles about in the offseason, right? Is that we modernized the whole playoff picture, but we forgot about the actual in-conference play and the implications that happen, especially too for the Big Ten. You know, none of these teams play each other. So.
And one of the things that I did take away from this ranking is that 4 of the top 5 teams are in the Big Ten.
Right.
Let's go ahead and get to the Big Ten.
Yep, and I think that gives Indiana. I'm curious what happens if Indiana loses to Ohio State.
So let's say Ohio State wins out because that would affect Indiana. So that means Indiana, if Ohio State wins out, that means they beat Indiana. Indiana would still have a 93% chance. On Saturday, I essentially said I feel like Indiana is a lock at this point. So that means they win their next opponent.
That's because they already
I love it when the computer yells at you.
You got to take off that tick next to Ohio
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, so if they win their next game, 99%. So 99% if they just win their next opponent.
Because they have a bye.
That's Ohio State, because they have a bye. But I feel like having Indiana at 5 this week gives them a little margin for error if they do lose. You're losing to the committee's number 2 team. They're the number 5 team. How far do they drop with a loss?
That's a great point, because that was the same thing that I said to Sam before we did the show today. Why did Indiana move up so much, right, in this spot when they had a tough win against Michigan, who is a 500 football team? You know, and that's where I was kind of like, why did the committee commit so aggressively to Indiana so soon?
They gave them more credit than I did in the projection. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
I have another question from the SEC for you guys, though, because I need to know what to do on Saturday night if Georgia beats Tennessee.
I know, that's fascinating.
Here's the conundrum.
The 2-loss love triangle is hilarious.
It's crazy, but
So Georgia beats Tennessee, it jumps up to 97%.
But where do you rank them?
Because they all beat each other.
Tennessee's 7, right? The head-to-head matters, but Georgia would have to jump Alabama and Ole Miss, which just beat them. What do you do?
What do you do?
What do I do on Saturday night?
And that was my big question mark for Alabama a week ago for you guys. I wasn't sure if I trusted them. And then here we are 2 weeks in a row where they have just completely ran the football at will on their opponents.
Which team in the SEC do you trust the most right now?
Oh, wow. Golly. I mean,
TBD after this weekend.
Right?
Yeah,
Like, seriously, I feel like
mean,
we got to see Georgia Tennessee play to see, like, what does Tennessee have, right? Can they put up points? We know they can run the football extremely well. Nico, we'll see.
TBD.
Questionable.
Yeah,
Yep,
TBD.
he might be in, he might be out, right? So he's dealing with an injury. They have Dylan Sampson. He's one of the best running backs in the country. Probably another guy that should be headed to New York for the Heisman conversation.
Good point.
But yeah, I don't know. It's
They're good.
I
They're
agree.
good.
I agree.
Hey,
They're
last
really
week-
good. They're really good.
Last week we said it was this, Matt.
I know.
And now we switched to this.
You know
Ole
what?
Miss.
Because
we said it was Texas, now it's Ole Miss.
I know, and I trusted Texas, but then when you go and look at what they've done this year, you kind of realize they haven't played, really necessarily anyone to say, wow, I really trust this football team. And with Quinn Ewers, with the Jacqueline Hyde type of play every now and then, I don't know. And then I always go back to the Texas-Georgia matchup, and I think about how Georgia just completely physically dominated them, and then that reminds me, wow, Ole Miss dominated them.
Yep.
So that's where the SEC gets very confusing.
Go ahead, HD.
Best quarterback in the SEC, Jackson Dart.
Yes.
I think, without doubt. But, I mean, I talked to Brian Kelly before that game, and he told me the 2 things that they had to do was stop a mobile quarterback, and he said, we haven't been able to do that, and bad things happen. And win the turnover battle.
So bad things did happen.
He knew it. He knew it. So, LSU, I think, is way down where they're supposed to be. But when you look at this group, and I asked the coach today, who's the best team in the SEC?
Yeah.
It depends.
Yeah.
And there's so many teams that have an opportunity here in the SEC, and there's no way you can count out any of these teams right here going all the way down to Texas A&M. Now, we only got a couple minutes left, and I wanted to ask you this question because we had a conversation about Army, right? Army comes down all the way to 24.
You just passed them.
Passed them.
Okay.
Where are they?
Right there.
There we go. So if Army wins out against Notre Dame,
We got some other
reset.
things here.
Okay,
Yeah. There you go.
Have those stuff. All right.
We have too much going on.
I thought
too
it would
excited.
reset. Okay. Army wins out against Notre Dame, 76% chance to get in. What is this the only path for Army? What are your
Just reading
thoughts
that
on
body
Army
language, not
getting
good.
a shot at Notre Dame and the United States of America being represented in the college football playoff?
It's such a good story,
It's a great
isn't
story.
it? It's a good
Great one.
story.
Yeah.
We're not that far from Veterans
But
Day.
look at where they, I know.
Yeah.
Look at where they are, though. And if they beat Notre Dame, what does Boise State do? This is independent of other results.
Yeah.
So to me, I feel like Boise State still has to lose. They got a long way to
Boise
climb.
State's got a trip up.
I mean, look at it. Army's next opponent is Notre Dame. Let's just say they beat Notre Dame. it's still just a 29% chance to make it to the college football playoff.
All right, but if they beat Notre Dame, though,
Yeah.
that helps us out with the conundrum of the SEC in that conversation. And
Texas
maybe
A&M.
even leaves the door open, too, for an Indiana team who loses to Ohio State.
Right. If Notre Dame loses, it also opens the door for a one-loss BYU that
Yes.
loses to Colorado.
Correct.
2 Big 12 teams. There are so many things that can still happen, which like 5 minutes left in the season.
What is probably the most fascinating thing that you've been paying attention to all day where you're like, wow, I can't believe this is actually a possibility?
I think the fact that Boise State could knock somebody out and get the bye.
Yeah.
And if SMU wins the ACC, I think the ACC still gets the bye ahead of Boise State because I think they would jump ahead of them by punctuating their resume. But if Clemson can win the ACC still, if you have a 2-loss Clemson, if Miami loses at Syracuse, which is very possible, and somehow still wins the ACC, then I think Boise State could get the bye. If over a 2-loss, or a 2-loss Colorado.
And let's not forget,
That's a good point.
It was only maybe a 3 or 9% chance, Sam, that the Big 12 could end up not having a team in the college football playoff at all.
Yeah, 9% chance that they don't have a team in at all. That's a very small chance.
Yeah,
It's a
wow.
chance.
Okay.
9%.
I'm just tossing that out there for
From
y'all.
what we've seen so far, anything is possible.
Anything is.
By the way, for those that want to play along with this little thingamajig at home, you can do that if you go
predictor.
to ESPN.com/Allstate Playoff Predictor to go and try it yourself because the scenarios are certainly out there and it is fascinating. The one thing that I noticed from this show, you had the 4 of the top 5 ranked teams were from the Big Ten.
Right.
That's a lot of home games for the Big Ten possibly coming up, and you have SEC teams going to play in some cold weather places. So
Very true.
That's
Great point.
something to keep an eye on as we go along.